Illinois is usually associated with Chicago's skyline, endless cornfields, and quiet Midwestern stability. But beyond the highways and modern suburbs, there is another Illinois, one that is disappearing. Hidden along rivers, tucked into forgotten lowlands, and scattered across the state's rural edges, are towns that have nearly slipped out of existence. Some were erased by water when rivers changed course. Others were abandoned after floods, economic collapse, or decisions that forced entire communities to move. In this journey, we'll trace 15 towns across Illinois that have almost vanished from the map. Each one carries a story of loss, survival, and disappearance. Proof that even in the heart of America, entire communities can fade into the background until only their names remain. Kaskaskia is not simply a town left behind. It is a town that was physically displaced by nature itself. Once the very first capital of Illinois, Kaskaskia did not collapse from crime, poverty, or industry failure. Instead, it was undone by the Mississippi River. In the 19th century, a series of powerful floods reshaped the landscape. The river shifted its course, cutting Kaskaskia off from the Illinois mainland and slowly erasing the ground beneath it. What had once been a thriving settlement became an isolated fragment, surrounded by water and erosion. Eventually, residents surrendered. The town could not fight the river forever. People left, land disappeared, and Kaskaskia faded into near-total emptiness. Today, only a handful of people remain. There is no real downtown, no school, and almost no functioning economy. Income statistics are nearly meaningless at this scale, often defaulting to broader Randolph County figures of around 55,000 United States dollars, which do not reflect the reality of a village this small. The deepest irony is that Kaskaskia still officially exists. It remains recognized as a village, complete with a local leader, Michael Sulzer, serving as village president, governing what is essentially a town that has been washed into history. If Kaskaskia disappeared because the river reshaped the land, Old Shawneetown became a victim of flooding followed by human decision. This town was once a major trading center along the Ohio River, filled with merchants, government buildings, and regional importance. For a time, it was one of the most active river towns in southern Illinois. But in 1937, catastrophe arrived. A massive flood devastated the settlement, destroying much of what had been built along the riverbanks. Instead of rebuilding on the same vulnerable ground, authorities made a different choice: relocate. Residents were moved to a new Shawneetown on higher land, leaving the original town behind as an abandoned shell. What remains today is almost unreal: cracked streets, empty structures, and buildings standing in complete silence. There is no economic activity, no true population, and no daily life. Household income is irrelevant because there are no permanent residents left to measure. If Kaskaskia disappeared because the river reshaped the land, Old Shawneetown became a victim of flooding followed by human decision. This town was once a major trading center along the Ohio River, filled with merchants, government buildings, and regional importance. For a time, it was one of the most active river towns in southern Illinois. But in 1937, catastrophe arrived. A massive flood devastated the settlement, destroying much of what had been built along the riverbanks. Instead of rebuilding on the same vulnerable ground, authorities made a different choice: relocate. Residents were moved to a new Shawneetown on higher land, leaving the original town behind as an abandoned shell. What remains today is almost unreal: cracked streets, empty structures, and buildings standing in complete silence. There is no economic activity, no true population, and no daily life. Household income is irrelevant because there are no permanent residents left to measure. Hillview is not a classic ghost town, at least not yet. It is still officially inhabited, a tiny village in Greene County that remains alive on paper. But its population has become dangerously small, and the trend is moving in only one direction. Recent census data shows Hillview with about 94 residents, down from nearly 200 in 2010. That kind of decline places the village in a fragile category, still existing but increasingly close to disappearing altogether if outward migration continues. Hillview's story is shaped by vulnerability. Younger generations leave for jobs and stability elsewhere, and there is little local momentum pulling them back. The village remains, but its future feels uncertain, like a place slowly thinning out year after year. One of the most defining events in Hillview's modern history came during the Great Flood of 1993. A levee failure caused the village to be almost completely submerged. In some areas, floodwaters reached as high as 20 feet, turning streets into water channels and homes into wreckage. The disaster left deep scars, not only physically but socially, accelerating the departure of families who no longer felt safe rebuilding in the same place. From shrinking villages, we returned to the riverbanks with Joppa, a settlement whose life was shaped and ultimately erased by water. Joppa was once a small but active river town, supported by trade, nearby farmland, and the steady movement of boats along the Ohio River. For a time, it functioned as part of the working river economy that once sustained countless communities in southern Illinois. But Joppa's location was also its weakness. Built low along the river, the town faced repeated flooding year after year. Ohio did not arrive once with catastrophe. It returned constantly, wearing the town down slowly. Eventually, the people surrendered. Homes were left behind. Schools shut their doors. Shops disappeared one by one. Today, Joppa is little more than quiet streets and empty structures, the last traces of a community slowly drained away. Yet its disappearance was not immediate. A few residents held on until the late 20th century, making Joppa a kind of semi-ghost town, nearly extinguished, but with human presence lingering longer than expected. About 18.6 miles farther south, we arrive in Cairo, a city whose story carries a much heavier weight. Cairo sits at one of the most strategic geographic points in America, the meeting of the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. Unlike Joppa, Cairo's tragedy cannot be explained by flooding alone. Here, economic collapse combined with racial division and deindustrialization to break a once important city apart. At its height, Cairo was a major center of transportation and commerce, with a busy port and critical rail connections. It was a place of movement, trade, and regional importance. But as the 20th century reshaped the economy, Cairo began losing the industries and infrastructure that once sustained it. Factories closed, jobs vanished, businesses downtown boarded up, entire neighborhoods emptied. Public services weakened as the population declined. The city also became a national symbol of racial conflict and social fracture, further accelerating instability and departure. Cairo's population has fallen from more than 15,000 in the 1950s to around 2,500 today. People still live here, but much of the city feels abandoned. Rows of empty homes, silent streets, and a downtown that no longer functions as it once did. Mound City is another Illinois town that once carried real regional importance. It functioned as both a military center and a working river port, tied to the movement of goods and boats along the Mississippi. If Cairo's collapse was shaped by multiple forces at once, Mound City's decline is more direct. Long-term stagnation and depopulation have drained the town of its social life. For decades, Mound City served as a local trade point and a stopping place for river traffic. But as the port economy lost relevance, the town began to hollow out. Businesses shut down gradually. Schools followed. Younger residents left for jobs and stability in nearby cities, leaving behind an aging and shrinking community. Today, much of Mound City feels unnaturally quiet. Main streets are sparse, abandoned houses sit in silence, and even crime statistics are minimal, less because the town is thriving, and more because so little active life remains. Median household income sits around 33,000 United States dollars, far below the national average, reflecting the economic pressure behind the town's slow exodus. Mound City still exists, but its social energy has nearly faded. From the river, we move inland to Mount Olive, a town shaped not by water, but by coal. Located in central Illinois, Mount Olive has deep roots as a mining community, built around an industry that once provided steady work and identity for generations. The threat here is not a sudden disaster. It is the disappearance of the economic backbone itself. Coal mines that once sustained the town have closed or shrunk dramatically, leaving fewer jobs and a fragile local economy with limited replacement industries. What remains is a community trying to endure after the foundation that built it has weakened. Mount Olive still holds visible reminders of its mining past. Historic buildings from the coal era remain standing, quiet witnesses to the town's rise and long decline. Over the past decades, the population has slowly decreased, and median household income sits around 40,000 United States dollars, below the Illinois average. Without new opportunity or younger generations choosing to stay, Mount Olive remains vulnerable, caught in the slow aftermath of a single industry town losing its purpose. After Mount Olive, we arrive at McClure, a small rural settlement that represents a different kind of fragility, a town hovering on the edge of becoming a ghost town. People still live here. Daily life continues, but the population shrinks year by year, and the future feels increasingly uncertain. McClure is not a river port or a mining center. It is a tiny agricultural village with very limited economic opportunity beyond its surrounding farmland. Streets are quiet, services are few, and local businesses often depend on an aging community that grows smaller over time. With only dozens to a few hundred residents, many young families eventually leave for larger cities where work and stability are easier to find. Median household income is around 38,000 United States dollars, reflecting the town's economic fragility and the lack of new pathways forward. McClure is still present, still inhabited, but it carries the unmistakable atmosphere of a place slowly approaching disappearance. Emmington is the kind of Illinois farming village that looks calm and untouched from a distance, yet carries the subtle marks of decline. It has no major industry to anchor it, no railroad lifeline bringing in commerce, and no river trade positioning it as a hub. Life here depends almost entirely on agriculture and a small network of local businesses, but that foundation is increasingly fragile. Like many rural towns across Illinois, Emmington faces the steady pull of outward migration. Younger residents leave for education, careers, and opportunity in larger cities, while empty homes and quieter streets remain behind. The town continues to exist, but the sense of momentum is fading. Emmington was once a gathering point for surrounding farmers, with active schools, churches, and community routines that gave the village structure. Today, its high school has already closed, and local shops depend heavily on customers coming from outside town. Median household income is estimated around 42,000 United States dollars, reflecting limited economic growth and few new job pathways. Emmington remains vulnerable, caught in the familiar cycle of an aging population, shrinking opportunity, and little new investment arriving to change its trajectory. Just a few miles south, Ruma reflects the same rural pattern even more sharply. This small agricultural community is increasingly seen as a town moving toward abandonment as population loss continues to weaken local life. Ruma was once surrounded by productive farmland and supported by a school, a few small businesses, and the everyday activity of families rooted in the area. Corn and soybean fields still stretch outward, but the human presence has thinned over time. Younger generations left for work and education elsewhere, and many never returned. Houses emptied, services declined, and the town grew quieter year by year. Despite its shrinking size, Ruma still holds visible reminders of its past: a historic church, an old town hall, and traces of a community that once felt complete. Median household income is estimated around 41,000 United States dollars, suggesting an economy too limited to attract new residents or reverse the decline. Ruma remains alive, but increasingly fragile, one of many rural towns slowly fading into silence. After moving through villages that are fading gradually, we arrive at a very different kind of decline: East St. Louis. Located directly across the Mississippi River from St. Louis, Missouri, this is not a town disappearing because of isolation or the loss of a single crop. East St. Louis represents something larger and more severe: extreme deindustrialization in modern America. This city was once a major industrial and transportation powerhouse, supported by factories, rail infrastructure, and steady employment. But as industries shut down or moved away, entire neighborhoods were left without an economic foundation. The result was a massive population exodus and the breakdown of local stability. Today, parts of East St. Louis resemble a modern ghost city: abandoned homes, closed schools, and weakened public services. The population has fallen from more than 82,000 residents in the 1950s to around 17,000 today, one of the most dramatic collapses in the United States. Median household income sits near 25,000 United States dollars, and poverty rates remain among the highest in Illinois. East St. Louis reveals a different kind of ghost town reality: not an empty village reclaimed by nature, but a city where people still remain, even as the economic lifeblood that once sustained it has nearly disappeared. From fading farming villages like Ruma, we now arrive in Nebo, a tiny agricultural community in Illinois that feels calm at first glance, but carries the quiet pressure of decline beneath the surface. Nebo depends almost entirely on local farming, with few businesses or alternative industries to provide stability beyond the fields. The town's roads are quiet, daily activity is minimal, and more homes are beginning to sit empty as younger families look elsewhere for opportunity. Life here continues, but on a shrinking scale. Schools serve only a small number of children, and the town's future feels increasingly fragile as population slowly thins out. Nebo is not abandoned, but it is vulnerable. One of many rural communities facing the long-term reality of outward migration. Still, the town holds on to its remaining social anchors. Historic churches and community halls remain active, serving as gathering points for those who stay behind. Median household income is estimated around 39,000 United States dollars, reflecting an economy that remains limited and easily shaken. Nebo survives, but it does so quietly, balanced on the edge of becoming another place left behind. Just 4 miles away lies Pearl, another small farming town that appears peaceful, yet shows the same slow erosion over time. Pearl was once a close-knit rural settlement shaped by farmland, modest shops, and an elementary school that served as the center of daily life. For decades, it functioned as a complete community for families rooted in the surrounding countryside. But that completeness has weakened. Over time, younger residents have left for education, careers, and stability in larger cities, leaving behind empty houses and streets that grow steadily quieter each year. Pearl has not collapsed in a single moment. It has simply faded gradually as the population drains away. What remains is history. Pearl still contains several 19th century structures, including churches and community buildings that stand as silent witnesses to a past when the town felt far more alive. Median household income is estimated around 40,000 United States dollars, signaling an economy too limited to attract new residents or meaningful investment. Pearl continues to exist, but its trajectory reflects a familiar rural pattern. Survival without growth, presence without momentum. After these shrinking agricultural villages, we reach Harvey, a place with a very different kind of decline. Harvey is not rural, and it is not disappearing because farmland has consolidated. Instead, Harvey represents an urban and fiscal breakdown, an example of how even suburban cities can begin to unravel. Once a busy community near Chicago, Harvey has faced years of structural financial crisis. At the height of its collapse, the city was forced into drastic measures. Nearly 40% of municipal staff were placed on unpaid leave, including police officers, firefighters, and administrative workers. The scale of that decision revealed just how fragile the city's foundation had become. Despite its proximity to one of America's largest metropolitan areas, Harvey has still lost residents as public services weakened and economic opportunity narrowed. Declining infrastructure, shrinking city capacity, and outward migration have created a cycle that becomes harder to reverse. Median household income sits around 38,000 United States dollars, lower than many surrounding suburbs, adding further social and economic strain. Harvey stands as a warning that closeness to a major city does not guarantee stability. Even in the shadow of Chicago, a community can begin to hollow out, not through abandonment of land, but through the slow collapse of institutions that keep city life functioning.